Candyman was released back in 1992 and for its time has become a cult hit and somewhat of an underrated and somewhat of an unappreciated horror film too. And in this film, the story revolves around this woman who is trying to find out the story and origins of a supposed legend myth known as Candyman after a supposed death of a teenage woman. And throughout her investigations, she goes through many encounters with the legendary killer. And Candyman will do anything to make her his victim. Candyman is the horror movie that I would look at to use as a perfect example of a horror movie that's so original. Just like in my last movie review, like Final Destination, that movie was so original and so clever in some certain ways. Candyman is an extremely original horror film. And I love that. I love when horror films have their own unique concept and don't try to copy off of another project that already exists and stuff like that. Because it's not really going to work out really that well. Which leads me to my thoughts on, is this movie good or bad? Well, first off, I just want to say that Candyman is a very effective horror movie, in my view at least. This movie is really beautifully shot, honestly. There are a lot of beautiful shots in Candyman that are honestly unforgettable. The first shots of this movie that show the title sequence and the camera floating over Chicago, I believe that's where the movie takes place. And then you have the title card popping up and the haunting score playing in the background. That's honestly a beautiful shot. And the entire film of Candyman is honestly really beautifully directed. I love the dark tone that this movie also tries to go for. It almost feels like a psychological slasher film, which it technically is, but it also has a lot of supernatural elements which fall into the story and the origins of Candyman and why he exists and why he's killing people and making people his victims. The reason for that is because people believe in Candyman, and that's why he exists and he's killing people and making them his victims. The reason why Candyman exists is because of the people. They actually believe in him. And we never really hear stories like this in horror movies, and it's actually really clever, actually. I actually enjoy the story that's behind this film, that's behind the villain Candyman, on how he became Candyman, which, by the way, if you haven't seen Candyman, I'm not going to go in depth of his origins or how he became who he is today, because I don't want to spoil this movie just in case if any of you haven't seen Candyman. But watch the movie, and I think you'll actually be pretty fascinated by the backstory and stuff like that. And I thought the way how the story was told in Candyman was very interesting, although it does slow down, and it's not just a couple of times in this movie. The pacing of the story does slow down pretty often in this movie, which does hurt the film. That's just one of my flaws about this movie, that the story does slow down in this movie in regards to, I wouldn't really say characterization wise, but I think the story isn't just like strong. It's not that deep. The movie is dark and it's pretty exciting to watch. And the origins of Candyman are very interesting. It's just that the story isn't deep enough. I'd have to say the characters are likable sometimes, here and there. The characters are likable. The acting is top notch. And the direction is really great, honestly, in this movie. I did not expect this movie to have surprisingly great direction. And the score is really good in this movie. A lot of things about Candyman are just absolutely surprisingly well done in this movie. There are a lot of things to like about Candyman. Now let's talk about Virginia Madsen, who plays as Helen in this movie. She is great in this movie. She is really good, actually, in this movie. And from the get-go, you can tell that her interest in her character is just to find out the origins of Candyman and if and why this legend exists and how he became who he is. And the storytelling from her character perspective, from Helen's character perspective, is really interesting. And that's the thing that I really appreciated about the main character in this movie. They actually made her a likable character. She wasn't dull. They actually made her a likable character, which is what I liked about Candyman. Tony Todd is fantastic in this movie as Candyman. He is haunting. He is creepy. He has that. You can tell that just by watching his performance in this film, he loves what he's doing. He absolutely enjoys on everything and every part that he plays in this movie. Tony Todd is really great as Candyman. He is like the definition of a killer in this film, honestly. He is not going to be like a killer like Michael Myers or Freddy Krueger or stuff like that. But there's just something about Tony Todd's villain that he plays in this movie as Candyman. There's just something about his villain that makes him so interesting and so dark. And it's hard to put it in words, but if you watch the film, you'd probably know what I'm talking about. And I hope you do watch this film because it's a really good horror film, actually, in my view at least. It's really fun, and Tony Todd delivers a really great performance in this movie. Cassie Lemons is really good in this movie, honestly. She's also a really great side character, especially for Helen. You could tell that they have good enough chemistry and stuff like that. They're not perfect or lovable characters. They're just likable characters. And I think that Lemons really does deliver in her character in this film, as well as Helen. Her character is strong. She's likable. She's relatable, and just seeing these two characters just work together to find the origins, to figure out the origins and the myths of this legend is absolutely astonishing. It's really fun to watch. But at the same time, Candyman does have its flaws, honestly. And I'd say one of the flaws that I do have with this movie is how the movie ends. And I'm not going to spoil the ending of this movie because just in case if any of you haven't seen Candyman, I'm not going to spoil anything about the ending of this movie, but it's just a big whoa. And it's not a good whoa either. But the ending of this movie, I think it didn't really have a purpose of being in the film, honestly. And like I said, my other flaw with this movie is that the story does slow down. But other than that, Candyman is a fun time. It is a very effective horror film. It has good characters, great direction, a very great villain played by a very talented actor. And Candyman is just a fun horror movie to watch. It's a cult classic. It's not a masterpiece, but it is a cult classic in its own right. And it's a very fun horror movie. And even though it's underrated, it deserves a spot for the genre, honestly. Candyman is a fun time, and it's an effective horror movie. Trust me when I say that, especially if you haven't seen this movie. I'm going to give Candyman a B. So guys, thank you guys so much for watching this review. Look forward to more movies reviews that I'll be doing in the future. But you guys are the best. I love every single one of you. Look forward to more horror movies for horror movie month and stuff like that. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching and showing support to my channel. And as always, I am Mario FanFact20, and I will see you next time. Peace out.